Week is about off-season fueling goals. So most likely all athletes are off season right now, whether or not you're, somewhat training, but for the most part, summer is a common off-season time. So there are a lot of things we can do during the summer or during off-season that can support, our season coming up. So that's what we're going to dive into today. So, why does off-season nutrition matter? Well, I mean, after a long season and school year of, wear and tear, your body needs time and nutrients to repair all the muscle damage, restoring glycogen, replenishing all the depleted vitamins and minerals from the season, and just overall being able to heal your body. It's a great time to provide it with those extra, recovery resources that, can help us focus on not only healing, physically from a tough season, but also mentally, emotionally, um, because it takes a toll on not just, our bodies, but our minds as well. It's also a time for us to kind of lay down the foundation to the upcoming school year and season, without that pressure of a rigid schedule, a time constraints, and, more flexibility for you to decide. And, when we build strong habits now, especially relating to, fueling, nutrition, it'll really make the start of your, next season much more smooth. And so it is also a time to reduce or mend, common injuries that often happen during the season. So, whether that's, re-strengthening your joint stability, alignment, any sort of strains that happens throughout the season. A lot of these things can be supported and aided by, how we, fuel and our nutrition that we take in. And then in the same light, allowing for, this time to be kind of a mental break from, all the rigor and rigidity of, a school schedule or an athletic schedule. And it, that can really serve some significant benefits as well, allowing yourself to unwind and relax and rejuvenate, can be a more enjoyable time of, your semester or your summer, to be able to try new foods, recipes, meal structures, without the pressure of needing to be kind of like perfect or on top of it. And during off season, athletes can, also leverage, muscle gain, to enhance their power and strength, like exponentially. It may also ultimately set an athlete up for their next season off, more robust with a fresh perspective, and to just kind of be able to amp up their strength ahead of time. And, you know, as a competitive athlete and active individual, gaining muscle or, building muscle can surprisingly be a much harder task than it seems, especially while you're in season. So considering that goal off season, might be a little bit more realistic or attainable. So it could be simply by, a lot of people think, building muscle or gaining mass can be just done by simply eating more, but there's far more to it when your goal is actually building, functional muscle mass because, and then with that increased muscle mass, we gain that greater stability to our joints and, those potential injuries that would happen. So it's really pairing, going hand in hand with that nutrition support of, reducing injuries, but also, just our ability to just have more strength at the start of the season, inevitably. And then finally, as we realize how quickly preseason creeps up, so allowing your body this time of the year to, you know, adapt to additional muscle mass off season can be a huge advantage when you actually get into starting the season. Now, what do we need to consider? So, not only is off season time for, just setting goals in your physical talent area with, your sports technique, etc. Nutrition goals should also be evolving right alongside these training goals. So we must first recognize and acknowledge that your lifestyle will look different than when it does during season. And we need to be mindful of this. Your training volume may decrease. Therefore, we need to adjust, nutrition accordingly based on, what your goals are as an athlete. So this may involve rebalancing your macronutrient needs, caloric needs, and just overall rigidity needs. It's a time for us to, or as athletes, to reflect back, on your previous season, assess what went well, what didn't go so well, and how you can then base your goals off of how you can adjust moving forward, specifically related to nutrition and then muscle and strength. So really, in general, what we don't want to do is just take this time to relax almost too hard. So we don't want to stop thinking about our health and wellness altogether, including nutrition, but we are able to kind of tailor it to what we need as an individual. So now is time. What are your goals? Is this, this is going to be a very individualized decision based on, yourself, your specific sport, what goals you're trying to achieve, or what changes you're trying to get into um, your performance. Do you want to build muscle mass? Do you just want to maintain your body composition? Do you want to lean out? Do you want to recover from an injury? Do you want to focus on improving your gut tolerance, meaning your ability to fuel closer to and or during training or games, etc.? Or do you just want to build new lifestyle habits? Are you anticipating or have plans to be moving off of campus this coming semester where you'll now have to be responsible for grocery shopping, for preparing meals, or, being more so on your own? Do you want to practice that meal prep learning or grocery shopping off campus? Like really kind of assessing what your upcoming semesters look like and then creating goals from there. Also remembering that we can't do too much all at once. Picking a couple goals and then kind of really sticking with that um, as your main focus is going to be the most sustainable and attainable decision. So we'll get back to goal basics. So are they smart? That's kind of going on from what I've just kind of measured. So are they specific, measurable, attainable, realistic, and time sensitive? So again, you really want to pick just a kind of a few habits or tasks, again, things that are manageable for you that you'd really like to improve during the summer and or off season. So examples might include something like drinking more water, going back to that training your gut and having, being able to have breakfast earlier in the day so that you can fuel better for, your training, or pre-workout tolerance. Limiting whether it could be also to limiting how much food you take out or buy out and trying to work towards preparing more food of your own and learning the basics of grocery shopping. So by choosing a couple of habits that again are smart, can be something that is maybe a little bit less daunting than just trying to take on all of it. And then again, remembering that rest and recovery is also necessary during this time. So that's why we don't want to take on too much, because we also, need to focus on that R&R. But, again, always important to keep nutrition a priority. So your goal may be related to adjusting your energy needs because, your training volume has shifted, um, whether it's significantly or slightly. And, just because you're not in season does not mean you as an athlete have stopped being active. More than likely, athletes are still going to be active throughout the summer. It's kind of stereotypically in their nature. So, and even in the off season. So this activity could include just your daily life needs, your casual workouts, any sort of cross training, um, you know, fun hiking or all of those kinds of things that may not be your sports training but still require energy. So this means we can't fall into a eat less mindset automatically. Just decreasing your energy intake too fast or too soon, or too significantly, can really impede the ability to heal all of those injuries, limit your strength gains, and even push that mental burnout even further. Given that the goal is to reset mentally, to recover from injuries, and to improve strength. That if we are just significantly cutting to avoid this weight gain that we would have since we're not training as much, it's really going to hurt us in the end. So instead of cutting out food groups or reducing intake drastically because you think that's going to balance things out, we want to start strategically looking more at like adjusting portion sizes. Can we slightly reduce the size of XYZ portion of starch, fats, protein, or just overall, if your overall training is reduced? We're not cutting out XYZ food groups, we're just maybe reducing the size. Can we emphasize fruits and vegetables for more satisfying volume and lean proteins for fullness? Just kind of shifting where you intake more and where you intake less. Instead of skipping meals, can we simply rebalance them? That's basically kind of what, the overall point is that, I want to make. So again, this could look like choosing low-fat yogurt over whole milk yogurt because during season you want to kind of meet your high energy needs, and that could look like choosing those whole fat dairy products. But off season, your energy needs might be a little lower. You still enjoy yogurt, you still enjoy milk. So maybe we just kind of choose those lower fat options that have slightly less calories. It even could look like choosing one slice of cheese on a sandwich instead of two. Those very, very small changes that together add up to make that, significant change. Again, just focusing on small shifts if this adjusting energy needs is your goal. Okay. So going back to last week's topic, just very briefly, in terms of macronutrients focus, continuing that balance of all three daily will still is important to support your off-season goals. And again, I will repeat many times, this totally depends on your off-season goal. However, we can recommend maintaining a balanced intake of carbs, fats, and protein daily. So whether you're in or off season, protein is gonna probably remain relatively the same, because it is essential for that muscle repair, growth, immune support, all of those things. And this is going to be the one macronutrient that we're not going to adjust super drastically. And wanting to continue that idea of spreading it out throughout the day. So we have a consistent intake and availability of amino acids. So in general, the numbers that you see here on the top, the 1.6 to 2.2, that's an example of how you can kind of assess for your personal protein needs. So converting your body weight into kilograms, saying grams per kilograms per day. So multiplying your kilograms by that 1.6 to 2.2 and kind of giving you a general range of what your protein needs may be. And then next, macronutrient carbohydrates. This is the one that is going to be probably needed more in season, but again, is still super important off season. This is the one that will probably just be manipulated a little bit more significantly. Carbohydrates are still super necessary for our energy level, repairing, any sort of injury. and continuing that activity that we want to sustain throughout the summer, just at a lower, volume or level. Because we still need to, replenish our glycogen stores, prevent muscle breakdown, etc. So the good sources, again, will maybe just look a little bit less than half of your plate. And then fats will kind of fill in the gaps of your caloric needs generally. It's going to look roughly like 25 to 30% of your caloric intake. Again, that's kind of hard to measure, but when we kind of just consider it as a significant part of our energy needs, that if that is our goal to reduce, that might be something that you kind of go to reduce portion sizes of. Because it's still super important, again, to help us absorb, fat soluble vitamins, A, D, E, and K, regulating hormones, supporting our fullness levels, reducing inflammation, etc. So the good sources of these are going to include, avocado, olive oil, nuts, seeds, salmon, nut butters, chia seeds, all those things. So kind of a pro tip, I guess, that is kind of helpful to consider is, at a meal, at meal times, breakfast, lunch, and dinner, including all three of these macronutrients. So making sure you look at your plate and having a protein, a carb, and a fat source. And then if you're having a snack, choosing at least two of these. So are you going to have, cheese and crackers? There's your protein or fat if it depends. I guess it's both. But and then, your carbohydrates for with the crackers. So in general, it's kind of just an easier way to approach, picking a meal or a snack. And then please don't forget to hydrate. This should be implied, but it's also super important, especially during the summer. Now, if building better habits is one of your off-season goals, it's an opportunity to reset, refocus, and begin incorporating these new habits. Maybe that looks like establishing consistency in your meal frequency or meal patterns. Can you prioritize eating 3 meals plus 2 to 3 snacks a day? Or just aiming to eat at least every 3 to 4 hours? Because typically in the summer, we have a little bit more flexibility, less rigidity in our schedule. So it allows us to kind of get used to and practice that meal consistency if getting that in during the season is a little bit more difficult to do, especially with the very full and busy schedule. Or again, like I said, maybe you're moving off campus and you'll have access to a kitchen. So can you learn basic meal prep? Can you learn easy cooking techniques? Or if you're not moving off campus, can you practice some recipes that you could even make in your dorm? So, can you just prioritize even microwaving oatmeal or making microwave omelets? All those things that, you can then take into your dorm. And then just in general, practice building performance plates. So performance plates being that balance of carbohydrates, protein, and fats. And then by practicing this throughout the summer, cooking at home, you're gonna you're gonna find you will have some kind of go-tos, things that are easy, things that you can rely on, things that you can always kind of lean on as kind of just that easy, whether it's like in the photo, breakfast burrito that you can make super easy. You'll find that for yourself. Or lastly, maybe you want to prioritize, reflection or grounding or just recentering yourself all uh, overall. It's completely understandable if you had a really stressful and busy year. Maybe what you really need to prioritize is disengaging and zenning yourself almost. And to connect it to nutrition, like, can you be intentional about reflecting upon how your nutrition was last season and be honest with yourself? Like, did you not fuel enough? Did you not fuel properly? what could you have done better? What could you, continue doing? What did you do one time that you found was really good and you should have done it more? Maybe that this is a time to kind of, um, you know, gather those thoughts and really kind of focus on them. And then there will be goals by sport or your position. So, are you an endurance athlete? Are you a strength athlete, power athlete? Are you a mix of both? It's again like this is part of that individualization of, you as an athlete. If you're an endurance athlete, maybe you want to focus on getting, extra carbs, iron, recovery nutrients like protein, omega-3s, fatty acids, and fruits and vegetables. You're probably going to want to maintain that lean muscle. So preventing underfueling that will then, degrade your muscle mass. Staying hydrated because you're going for long periods of time. So can you, train yourself to be, feeling with not only water, but electrolytes, especially when the summer is hot. Um, if you're a power strength athlete, maybe you want to take this time to focus on building muscle. How do you get adequate calorie intake? How do you, get enough protein? How are you supporting that through your training? Um, and considering avoiding that rapid excessive bulking. So almost going too hard too fast because that could indirectly, lead to just fat gain rather than muscle gain. And just being honest with being recognizing that body composition and muscle building, all that takes time. So starting now is going to be key to really setting yourself up for this upcoming season. And then all of this pairs again with, how you continue to train and stay active during the summer. So what are common mistakes? So I can just anticipate what common mistakes may be, from anyone over the summer. The first one being is just simply under eating or under fueling. Just because you're training less doesn't mean you don't need to still focus on your fueling. Building muscle requires just inevitably a calorie surplus or at least a maintenance, not a restriction. You're not going to achieve your goal of building muscle or repairing your injuries if you are not in a slight caloric surplus and or maintenance level. Skipping meals, fasted training. So this is really going to impede your recovery, lead to greater fatigue and the inability to then train again the next day. It's going to really slow down and delay how much you are able to bounce back from, a training session after a heavy lift or a high output day. Um, Trying to fall under the, idea of sticking to a rigid diet or some certain, restrictive mindset, whether that's, on, you know, just cutting out a certain food group or something like that. That can really harm your metabolism, your mood, and then further setting you up for further risk of injury. Um, and then neglecting that recovery fuel and hydration. So if you're training, but you're not then afterwards recovering with proper nutrition, protein, with carbohydrates, with, fruits and vegetables, you're gonna lose that muscle mass. You may end up with electrolyte imbalances, which is really going to impede your ability to train. All these things and just simply ignoring goals. That's could be a mistake. They take, it's very understandable, but likely if you can mistake and take summer off and completely just ignore your training or your nutrition. You don't have any sort of plan, any sort of structure, and then again, preseason comes up really quickly and you're poorly prepared. So, some key takeaways that I want you to all leave with is again, setting smart goals that are individual to you. Choosing just a few goals or one or two or three and really sticking to them. Don't take on more than you can handle in the sense of, what you want to work on this summer. Focusing on fueling for strength and recovery and adjusting your energy needs as needed by, your training volume may go down. Therefore, depending on your goals, your caloric needs may also decrease, but still prioritizing protein and carbohydrates to support your activity and just focusing on more so reducing portion sizes instead of cutting out food groups or cutting out meals. Build healthy habits now to take into your season coming up. Now is the time, because again, it is a learning curve. It's a learning journey. It's a path you have to take. And starting now is going to, really set yourself up the best that you can, whether that includes structuring your meals, focusing on consistency, prep, etc. And then allowing yourself to reset, recover, set intentions of growth, but not without too much rigidity. And just in general, seeing off season as an opportunity to level up. So see this as an opportunity to grow, to learn from previous mistakes and to try new things, without that pressure of being in season and needing to be, head on. And that's all I have for you. So thank you for that and sitting and listening. I want to open it to any questions if there are any. If not, you can always email me, but I appreciate everyone sitting here.
I'm all set. Thanks, Olivia.
Thank you, Olivia.
Yes, absolutely.
Good stuff,
So
Olivia. Appreciate it.
thank you, Keith. I will send out this recording. Actually, let me stop recording. And I will have it uploaded